It felt like the walls themselves were listening. The old Harrington mansion stood silent and watchful as the family gathered in the grand dining hall, each member wearing polite smiles that looked more like masks. At the head of the long mahogany table sat Charles Harrington, the patriarch whose gaze could freeze your soul faster than the winter wind. To his right was Eleanor, his eldest daughter, elegant as always, her fingers tapping the glass as if to remind everyone she was bored. Next to her, Miles, the golden boy, the one who'd inherited his father's sharp mind but none of his warmth. At the far end, so far it felt like another country, sat Martha, the matriarch, clutching her pearls like a shield. The lawyer cleared his throat, voice echoing off the marble floors. So, the final reading of the will is to be concluded today. After that, the estate will be divided. A faint creak of the door interrupted him. Heads turned. Time seemed to tighten. She stepped inside like a ghost, except ghosts don't wear red lipstick or hold their chin so high. It was Isabella, the youngest, the one they'd all sworn to forget, the sister who'd been banished 10 years ago after the scandal no one dared speak of. She was supposed to be gone forever, but here she was, alive, unbent, her eyes glinting like a blade drawn in moonlight. "Don't stop on my account," Isabella said, her voice sweet as poisoned honey. "I believe I'm still family, aren't I?" Charles's glass cracked in his hand, a spiderweb of broken crystal. Eleanor's lips curled into a frozen smile, like a rose with hidden thorns. Miles didn't say a word. His stare was a riddle. Was it fear, guilt, or a silent warning? Isabella walked slowly, the click of her heels echoing like a clock ticking down to something terrible. "You all look like you've seen a ghost," she said, brushing imaginary dust off the seat at the table. "Relax, I'm not here for revenge." She paused. The air seemed to hold its breath. "Well, not yet." A single chandelier swung ever so slightly above the table, its crystals tinkling like distant bells at a funeral. Nobody spoke, but their eyes screamed whole novels of buried secrets. Isabella leaned back in her chair, legs crossed, as if she owned the room. She toyed with the silver locket around her neck, the same locket their mother Martha once claimed had been lost with her innocence. "You look well, sister," Eleanor said, her voice dripping sugar but tasting of poison. "Exile suits you. Where did you crawl back from, the gutter?" Isabella chuckled, a sound sharp enough to slit the tension. "Oh, I learned so much in the gutter, Eleanor. How to survive with knives at my back. How to smile when you want to scream." Her gaze flicked to Miles, who flinched just enough for her to notice. "Hello, Miles. I see you kept my old seat warm." Miles cleared his throat, but no words came. His eyes darted to their father. Charles's voice was gravel dragged over glass. "Why are you here, Isabella? We settled your share long ago. You forfeited your rights the day you shamed this family." That word, shame, buzzed in the air like a wasp refusing to die. Isabella's smile faltered just a fraction. "Did I shame this family, father? Or did I just expose what you wanted buried?" She reached into her coat pocket. A folded photograph. She laid it on the polished table like a curse. It was old, a picture of a girl, no older than 18, standing next to a man who wasn't Charles, a man whose eyes looked suspiciously like Miles's. Eleanor's face drained of its roses and pearls perfection. Martha choked on her breath, pearls clutched so tight they could shatter. "This again," Charles's voice thundered. "We agreed this was dead, the past is past." Isabella leaned forward, her voice now soft, the softness before a storm. "You can't bury the truth forever. Like weeds, it finds its way through the cracks." The lawyer stood frozen, papers trembling in his hands. Outside, thunder rumbled as if the universe itself leaned in to listen. The rain outside had turned from a polite drizzle into a furious drumbeat on the windows, like an army of ghosts demanding entry. Isabella tapped her fingernail against the photograph. 1, 2, 3 sharp clicks, like a judge about to pass sentence. "This man," she said, looking right at Miles, "was Mother's real love. Not the man who claimed her, not the man who sits here, pretending to be the hero." Charles's hand slammed the table so hard the glass trembled. "Enough!" His eyes, once cold and composed, now flared wild, like a fire that knows it's about to be smothered. "No, father." Isabella leaned closer, so close she could smell his fear. "Enough pretending. You always called me the shame of this family. But the real shame was you, sleeping with every illusion but the truth." Eleanor sprang from her seat, her face blotched red like a wine stain. "You ungrateful witch! You disappeared for 10 years, left us to pick up your mess, and now you come back waving that filth? What do you want, Isabella? Money? We all know you're desperate for it." Isabella laughed. Not a sound of joy, but a bitter, bone-deep howl that silenced the room. Oh, Eleanor, sweet, perfect Eleanor, still playing the dutiful daughter while you poison our father's mind behind closed doors. She turned to Miles, the one who had always been so quiet, so careful. And you, brother, what do you call him, Dad? Or do you taste ash in your mouth every time you say it? Miles opened his lips, but the words tangled like thorns in his throat. Isabella, don't do this. This family, we, Isabella snapped. There is no we. There is a man who lied, a woman who covered it up, a son who wonders why he never quite fits, and me, the daughter you all tried to forget. Lightning lit up the room. For a heartbeat, their faces looked like painted masks in a nightmare carnival. The lawyer cleared his throat. Miss Harrington, do you wish to contest the will on the basis of this? Isabella's eyes locked on Charles. Her father, her warden, her enemy. She spoke so softly the rain seemed to hush just to listen. I don't want your money, father. I want your kingdom to rot. And I'll stand here day after day, tearing down every wall until everyone knows what you built it on. Martha, the mother, could only whisper, You'll destroy us all. Isabella finally smiled, wide, cold, unbent. No, mother, I'm just setting us free. The thunder outside answered her like applause. The storm outside showed no sign of mercy. Winds howling like wolves around the old house, testing every locked window for a weakness. In the study, Isabella stood by the fireplace, staring at the portrait above it, a painting of her parents on their wedding day, painted lies in gold frames. Miles drifted in behind her. His steps were soft, the way you approach a wounded animal. Isabella, his voice cracked like old floorboards. Why do you have to do this? They're our parents. She didn't turn, just traced the edge of the frame with her fingertip. They are not yours, Miles, not the way you think. He swallowed. You could see it. That tiny flutter in his throat like he'd just tasted poison. I grew up in this house, he said, voice rising, desperate. I sat at this table, took his name. He's my father, isn't he? Isabella finally turned to him, eyes soft but merciless. Blood doesn't make you family, brother. Loyalty does, and truth does. And if you think loyalty means swallowing their poison just because they gave you a roof, then you're still their perfect little lamb. Miles's fists clenched at his sides. I'm not your enemy. No? She stepped closer. Then tell me when he hit Mother that winter. When she locked herself in this very room to cry. Where were you? When he sent me away, told the town I was unstable? Where were you? Miles tried to answer, but guilt is a gag you tie on your own tongue. She placed her hand on his chest, right above his heart. You want to help me? Then stop pretending you're innocent. You're either in the storm with me, or you're part of what I'll burn down. He grabbed her wrist, gentle but trembling. Isabella, how far are you going to go? Her eyes glittered in the firelight, like a blade catching a candle flame. Far enough to bury every lie they ever fed us. Far enough to show the world that this family's name tastes like ash in every mouth that says it. Outside, the wind slammed a shutter against the wall, a gunshot echo that made them both flinch. And in that silence, the truth settled between them, heavy, bitter, unstoppable. Isabella pulled her hand back. You can leave now, Miles, or you can help me, but you don't get to stand in my way. Miles didn't move. He just watched her, the sister he thought he knew, becoming something he no longer recognized. The dining room was still set for a feast no one would finish, silver cutlery gleaming under the chandelier like tiny daggers waiting for a throat. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, posture perfect, chin lifted just enough to look down on every soul who dared to breathe in her presence. Her silk robe was the color of spilled wine, fitting, Isabella thought, for someone so good at pretending things were beautiful when they were rotting inside. Isabella didn't knock. She just stepped in, muddy boots and all, leaving prints on that expensive rug Eleanor adored. Eleanor's eyes flicked down, then back up, a practiced smile curling on her lips. I see you still enjoy dramatics, dear sister. Isabella didn't waste a second. She strode forward and snatched the crystal decanter from the table, the one Eleanor always guarded like a relic. She held it up to the light, watching the dark liquor swirl like secrets you can't swallow anymore. How long, Isabella asked, voice low, razor-edged. How long have you known what he did to Mother? To me. Eleanor didn't flinch. Her mask was carved from years of lessons. Smile sweetly, speak softly, betray quietly. You're being ungrateful, Eleanor sighed, pouring herself a drink. You have this home, this name, this life, all because he took care of us. Whatever he did for our own good. The words made Isabella's hands shake. She slammed the decanter onto the table so hard it rattled the plates. He broke us, Eleanor. He bled us dry for his good name. And you? You just sat here pouring tea for monsters. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She lifted her glass, took a sip, ice clinking like tiny bells at a funeral. You think this house runs on truth? On love? No, darling, it runs on secrets. Well kept, well fed. Try tearing them down and you'll bury us all. Isabella leaned forward, voice a whisper sharp enough to draw blood. I'd rather bury every brick of this house than live in its poison one more day. Eleanor tilted her head, mask slipping just enough to reveal the cracks. For one breath, she looked afraid. Then she smirked. You were always Mother's favorite. Look where it got you. Filthy boots, a ruined name, no one left to run to. Isabella smiled, and it was the smile of a wolf with its jaws locked on the throat. No one but you, sister, and you'll choose soon enough, this poison or freedom. She snatched the glass from Eleanor's hand, poured its contents onto the rug, a stain that wouldn't come out. When I light the match, Eleanor, you better decide which side of the fire you want to stand on. She turned, boots squelching, leaving a trail of muddy defiance behind her. The chandelier swayed above, trembling like it knew its time was coming. The cellar door creaked open like an old wound splitting. The air was damp, thick with the smell of rusted metal and secrets too heavy to bury. Isabella descended the narrow stone steps, each one colder than the last. Her lantern cast long, trembling shadows on the walls, flickering over shelves stacked with dusty preserves and bottles no one touched anymore. But it was not the pickles or the wine she came for. In the back, near the old coal chute, sat Thomas, their cousin. A man once sharp as a knife, now dulled by drink and fear. He looked up when Isabella's boots echoed on the concrete floor. Bella? His voice cracked like cheap porcelain. She crouched in front of him, lantern glow dancing in her eyes. Did you think I'd forgotten you were down here? She asked it sweetly, like a sister offering cake at a funeral. Thomas tried to straighten his shirt, failed. His hands trembled. I didn't know, Bella. I swear, he told me to look the other way, said the family. Isabella cut him off with a laugh, dry, sharp, echoing off the stone. The family. She tilted the lantern closer to his face. Is that what you tell yourself? That you were protecting us? Or just protecting your coward's skin? Thomas's eyes darted to the staircase. The same way prey checks for an exit it'll never reach. Please, we can fix this. Eleanor, she says you're going to burn the house down, but we can keep it quiet. We can... She leaned in so close he could feel her breath, warm and dangerous. Tell me what you saw that night. Every word, every crack of bone, every lie you swallowed so you could sleep in silk sheets. He shook his head. He'll kill me. You don't understand, Bella. He's still here. He never really left. Isabella's lips curled into something that might have been a smile. If smiles could bleed. I know he's here, Thomas. She pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the frantic heartbeat beneath. He's here. In you, in Eleanor, in every locked door of this house. She stood, lantern raised high, throwing monstrous shadows on the stone walls. But he doesn't own me anymore. And he doesn't own you, unless you let him. Thomas looked up, eyes glistening with the last spark of a courage he thought he'd buried. What do you want me to do? His voice was almost a whisper, like a prayer he wasn't sure would be heard. Isabella's boots scraped the floor as she stepped back, lantern blazing like a torch in the dark. When the fire comes, Thomas, you open every door. Let the truth out. Let it choke them like smoke. She left him there, lantern light flickering behind her like the promise of dawn to a man who'd only known dusk. And behind her, the cellar door creaked shut, a coffin lid waiting to be torn open. Upstairs, the hallway felt longer than it ever had, each step like crossing a tightrope over the mouth of hell. Eleanor paused at the door. It was once her father's study, the room nobody entered after he died. Some said he still sat in there, back turned to the world, whispering orders through the cracks in the wood. She pressed her palm to the door. It felt warm, like the breath of a wolf waiting on the other side. Inside, the curtains were drawn tight. The smell of stale cigar smoke clung to the heavy drapes, the desk still stacked with ledgers and broken promises. Father, she whispered, though no one living would answer. She stepped in, shoes sinking into the worn carpet. The chair behind the desk was turned away, empty, of course. But her skin crawled like he might spin around any moment. On the wall hung the family portrait, the only one where they all looked like strangers. Her father's hand clamped on her shoulder like a chain. Why? Eleanor asked the shadows. Her voice trembled, but the rage beneath it was sharp as glass. Why did you choose him, Thomas, to hold your secrets? Why did you make Isabella bleed for your sins? Silence answered her. But in that silence, she heard it all. The slaps hidden behind closed doors, the hush money, the late-night arguments that ended with bruises no one dared name. She walked to the fireplace. The grate still held the charred remains of letters her mother once tried to burn, confessions that never turned to ash completely. I see you now, she said, staring at the portrait. You thought if you controlled us from the grave, you'd win. But Isabella's fire will turn this place into your funeral pyre. Her hand brushed the mantle. She found the loose panel Thomas once told her about, the hollow behind it where her father hid his real will, the deeds, the debts that kept them chained. She pulled it free. Papers spilled out like rotten teeth. She stuffed them into the fireplace, struck a match, and watched the edges curl and blacken. Outside the study door, footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. Isabella. She stepped in, lantern raised, eyes catching the flames eating the past. Do you hate him too? Isabella asked. Eleanor didn't flinch. No, she turned, the fire dancing in her eyes. I don't hate the dead. I hate the way the living keep him breathing. Isabella placed the lantern on the desk, the same desk their father had pounded his fists on when the lies cracked open. Then let's make sure this is the last night he haunts these walls. For a moment they stood together, two daughters who'd grown up in a house of locked doors and shuttered mouths. Sisters, not by choice, but by survival. Outside, thunder rumbled, a promise that the storm would come to wash the ashes clean. The storm outside was no longer a threat. It was a hymn, rattling the old windows as if to say, bury him, burn him, start over. Eleanor and Isabella stood side by side in the flickering light of the fireplace. The flames devoured every last ledger, every forged promise. It smelled like old secrets turning to smoke. But Thomas lingered behind them. Thomas, who'd been their father's right hand and his favorite shadow. He watched the pages burn, his eyes dark and unreadable. This changes nothing, Thomas finally said. His voice carried the same chill that had once silenced a room when their father spoke. Isabella turned to him, chin raised. It changes everything. No more secret debts, no more hush money. We're free. Thomas gave a humorless laugh, like nails scraping glass. You think you're free? You think this house will forgive you for tearing out its rotten heart? He stepped closer to the fire. Eleanor could see his jaw twitch. The same twitch he'd had when he'd lied for their father, when he'd stood by while the beatings came down like rain. Thomas, stand with us, Eleanor said. She reached for him, but he pulled away like her touch was poison. Your father made me what I am. Thomas's eyes gleamed in the firelight. I owed him everything, my life, my loyalty. You want to burn him out of these walls? You'll have to burn me too. Isabella took a step forward. Her voice was ice. Then so be it. But before she could reach him, Thomas lunged. A flash of steel, the hidden knife he'd kept strapped to his boot for years. Eleanor shoved Isabella aside just as Thomas grabbed her wrist, twisting it behind her back. The blade pressed against her neck, hot and cold all at once. Stop, Isabella screamed. The fire roared in the grate, a mockery of the storm inside the room. I won't let you destroy his legacy, Thomas hissed. Eleanor felt his breath on her ear. It smelled like whiskey and something rotten. You can't guard a ghost forever, Eleanor spat back. She stomped her heel onto his instep, a trick she'd learned from watching her mother defend herself once, long ago before fear taught them silence. Thomas yelped. The blade slipped. Eleanor twisted free, her shoulder screaming in pain, but the shock on Thomas's face was worth it. Isabella lunged this time, fire poker in hand. She swung with all the fury of a life stolen, a mother's tears, a sister's bruises. The poker hit Thomas's temple. He crumpled to the floor, not dead, but the betrayal in his eyes was the last thing he'd ever be able to protect. For a heartbeat, the room was silent except for the crackle of flames and the moan of wind clawing at the shutters. Eleanor's hands trembled as she looked at Isabella. Soot streaked her face, but her eyes were clear and deadly calm. It's not over yet, Isabella whispered. Outside, the storm howled louder, as if the old house itself was begging to be cleansed. They thought the fire had swallowed every lie. They thought Thomas was the last ghost they'd have to bury. But old houses have memories that cling to the bones, memories that don't burn easy. The storm still raged outside. Eleanor tied a torn bedsheet around her shoulder where Thomas had wrenched it. Isabella held the fire poker like a weapon, her knuckles white. They stumbled through the hallway, feet crunching on glass and old papers. Every step felt heavier, as if the house was rooting them down. One last punishment for their rebellion. Then they saw it. A door, half rotten, hidden behind a hanging tapestry of a stag hunt. A door they'd never noticed, though they'd walked past it for years. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "Do you remember this?" Isabella shook her head, eyes wide. "No, but I feel like it's looking at me." Lightning flashed. For a heartbeat, the tapestry's woven deers seemed to run, to flee from the truth stitched behind them. Eleanor yanked the fabric aside. The door was padlocked, but rust had eaten through the chain. Isabella struck it with the poker. The lock fell with a dull clank. The door creaked open. It smelled of mold and something older. Something sweet, like spoiled wine or flowers left too long in a vase. Inside was a small chamber. Stone walls, a single chair, and on that chair, a box, a beautiful lacquered box, the kind their father used to keep his letters. "Eleanor, don't," Isabella whispered, but Eleanor was already reaching for it. She lifted the lid. Inside were bundles of old photographs, each labeled in their father's harsh, spidery handwriting. Mistake. Liability. Control. Faces stared up at them. Girls who looked like them. Women with the same dark eyes. Some photos were faded, almost gone. Some were new enough to make Eleanor's stomach twist. At the very bottom of the box lay a key, tarnished, heavy. Isabella picked it up with trembling fingers. "What is this for?" Behind them, the storm thundered like a warning. A loose floorboard groaned. The whole house seemed to lean in, listening. Eleanor ran her fingers along the walls, found the seam of another door, hidden in plain sight. She fit the key into a tiny lock. It turned with a click that echoed like a gunshot. The hidden panel swung open. A staircase spiraled down, into blackness so thick it swallowed the lamplight whole. Isabella turned to Eleanor, voice barely a whisper. "Do we go down?" Eleanor looked back at the flames, licking the ceiling beams behind them. The fire they'd set to free themselves. But maybe freedom was deeper than ashes. She nodded. "We finish it, all of it." Hand in hand, they stepped onto the stairs, leaving the crackle of burning lies behind, descending into the truth that waited in the dark. The staircase spiraled downward like the throat of some giant beast, swallowing the sisters step by step. Each footfall echoed back, the old stones whispering their names, over and over, as if the house itself was chanting a lullaby for the damned. Eleanor gripped Isabella's hand so tightly her knuckles ached. The lantern flickered, a dying firefly in a pit of black. Finally, the stairs gave way to packed earth. A cellar? No, older than that. A catacomb that smelled of damp secrets and broken promises. In the center, a single iron door, half buried in the earth. Carvings on it. Words in Latin neither of them could read. Eleanor bent close. The key fit perfectly. Click. The door swung inward, groaning like a creature waking from centuries of sleep. Inside, a stone room lined with shelves. Jars upon jars of preserved things. Feathers, locks of hair, teeth yellowed and marked with dates. In the middle, a table, and on it, a book bound in leather so worn it looked like dried skin. Isabella stepped forward, throat dry. "What is this?" Eleanor flipped through the pages. They were filled with ledger entries. Names, amounts, transactions, girls traded like cattle, lives bartered for power. And there at the end, their mother's name, crossed out, paid in full. Beside it, a final entry, next of kin, forfeit if non-compliant. Isabella covered her mouth to stifle a sob. "He sold us." Eleanor nodded, rage simmering behind her eyes. This is how he built everything. This house, the lands, the family name, all of it paid in blood. She grabbed a rusted oil can from a shelf, started splashing the old papers, the jars, the book. Isabella caught her wrist. "Wait, if we burn it all, what's left of us?" Eleanor's voice was steel. "What's left is us, not him, not this." A single match, a single spark. The flames raced up the walls like angry ghosts, devouring every record of their stolen childhood. They stumbled back as the fire roared, hotter than the one above, like the house's rotten heart was finally being torn out. Through the crackling roar, Eleanor pulled Isabella close. "No more secrets, Isa, no more chains." Isabella buried her face in Eleanor's shoulder. Through her tears, she saw the stone ceiling crack. Centuries of lies finally crumbling. Above them, the house began to scream. Beams splintering, glass shattering like a final cry. Hand in hand, they ran up the spiral stair. Behind them, the flames feasted, burning every ledger, every tooth, every lie, until nothing remained but ash and the promise that they would never again be bought or bartered. They burst into the night, rain slashing across their skin, washing the soot and blood away. The house, their prison, their inheritance, collapsed behind them, roaring into the storm. And when dawn broke, the sisters stood alone on the hill, bruised but unbroken. The house was gone. The ghosts were gone. All that remained was the two of them, and a freedom they had carved out, bone by bone, truth by terrible. The only way out is through the fire. You have to burn the past to find the pieces of yourself that no one can ever sell again. Sometimes, stories like this remind us that family can be a cage as much as a cradle, that the past, no matter how heavy, can be burned down piece by piece if we dare to face it. I believe we all carry hidden doors inside us, secrets we're too afraid to unlock. But maybe, just maybe, courage is the match we strike when the darkness feels too thick to breathe. If this story touched something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your feelings, your own secrets. You're never alone here. And if you want more tales that linger in your mind like this one, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss what's coming next. Your support means the world. Thank you for being here and for letting these words find you.